Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, November 1st. I hope everybody had a great Halloween last night. Hope everybody is having a great day so far today. In this episode, we of course on Fridays go over our game picks for the weekends. We have a brand new slate of college football games, of NFL games to go over in today's show. We'll also go over the Thursday night battle that saw the Jets get their first victory in 5 weeks, a massive win for them that keeps their playoff hopes alive. We'll talk about what that win meant for them and for the Texans, that loss. And of course, we're also going to talk a little bit about the NBA. Some rumors going around about Giannis Antetokounmpo being traded. We'll talk about whether that is fact or fiction later on. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, November 1st. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show with a review of the Thursday night football game that saw the New York Jets win for the first time in 5 weeks. Started off the season at 2-1, lose 5 straight, including a loss to the New England Patriots last week that saw them basically hit rock bottom. This was yet again another must win for them. They get away with one here. That's the best way to put it. They win 21-13 after going into halftime scoreless. Really a masterclass of a second half for Aaron Rodgers and the Jets here. The real big takeaway that I had from this game, outside of the Jets really entirely, is the Texans and that offensive line. We all knew that offensive line was bad, right? But putting it under the microscope, under the spotlight of a primetime game, giving up 8 sacks to a unit in the New York Jets pass rush that had been struggling all season long, a pass rush and defensive unit that was very ineffective on all season so far, was very glaring. Giving up 8 sacks to that unit is not a good look. And I know that, this is a Jets team that has been beatable in the past. This was probably their best game since their Week 3 game against the Patriots. This was a really, really must-win game for them, and that first half looked like nothing was going to change. But in that second half, Aaron Rodgers comes out, throws for almost 300 yards, throws for 3 touchdowns, a near-perfect half from Aaron Rodgers, that kind of vintage Aaron Rodgers that we had not had in basically all season. Since he left Green Bay, we haven't had this kind of vintage Aaron Rodgers. This was the get-back game that they needed. Looking ahead at the Jets' schedule here, after this win against the Texans, right? This is a Jets team that doesn't have too hard of a schedule. They still have a bye week coming up. They have the Cardinals, the Colts, the Seahawks, the Dolphins, the Jags, the Rams, the Bills, and the Dolphins again. Out of those weeks, there's only a couple of teams on that list that I'm truly scared of really facing. The Rams and the Bills being 2 of them. The Dolphins can always give them a fight because it's a division game, and I don't know what kind of these 50-50 teams in the Cardinals, Colts, and Seahawks they're going to get. It's not necessarily a hard schedule, but it's also not the easy one that a lot of people have been talking about. I've been hearing a lot of, hey, they could run the table if they get this win against the Texans. And yes, this is a good start. And running the table is practically what they're going to need to do if they want to prove that they have something. As far as making the playoffs in the AFC, with how weak it is, you've got a 4-4 team currently in the playoffs. The Jets sitting at 3-6, while they're not in a great spot, they're only 2-ish games out of a playoff spot. So it's not like this is a insurmountable kind of lead that they just have no chance of coming back from. All that being said, this is a Jets team that showed me something. This is the Jets team that I was ready to throw out after last week, after they lose to a Jacoby Brissett-led Patriots team. This was a Jets team that seemingly had no life. They had lost their last 3 games after firing coach Robert Saleh. Their defense had looked so much worse after firing coach Robert Saleh, and the offense just had not gotten better. Despite trading for Davante Adams, despite switching play callers, they had seemingly done all the desperation moves, but now we finally saw the Jets step up, and a lot of it was because of miraculous plays made especially by Garrett Wilson, a guy that hadn't had a really good start to the season, had a little bit of drop issues, had a little bit of issues getting on the same page as Aaron Rodgers. It took about half a season, but they finally look like they're getting comfortable with each other. Davante Adams caught his first touchdown as a Jet. Everything is coming together for the Jets right now, at least in the second half of that game. And that's going to be the memory that sticks in everybody's mind because it's the imprint that was left most recently. People will forget about that first half if you show them that second half. This is something that they need to build on. It's good that they got momentum heading out of that game instead of doing opposite, having a great first half and a really bad second half. I think that is a huge, huge thing for them. They can carry that momentum, see what worked against what is a good Texans team. A Texans team that should have been able to run all over them, but they tried to pass it a little bit. I feel like they got a little pass happy. If they had, I think, stuck on the ground a little bit more with Joe Mixon, they might have been just a little bit more successful in this one. You can nitpick a lot of things with the Texans. They're still a team that has their fair share of issues, right? The Texans don't have that wide receiver depth, really. They should be getting Nico Collins back, hopefully, for them. But Tank Dell had his best game of the season. Wasn't able to get into the end zone, but over 125 yards through the air. He was that main weapon and a guy that looks like he can be relied on. You're going to need more out of that offensive line, though, and that is the biggest thing. We've already seen Cam Robinson get traded in this season last week from the Jaguars. If the Texans feel like this is a year where they can make some noise, why not go out and try and make a trade for another offensive lineman? Try and get someone, just try and shore up that offensive line a little bit. I know it's not a move that you can just snap your fingers and have it happen. It's going to be a little expensive to have that kind of move go through. And there's not too many offensive tackles, offensive linemen that are kind of even on the market. If we look at these teams that are bad generally, their offensive lines are bad as well, and they don't really have that guy that's worth trading. Maybe they can find a way to sneak one from the Browns, but I highly doubt that that's going to happen. There's a lot of things that could go on for this season for the Texans, but I am a little bit concerned with their inability to shut down a Jets team that, yes, while they were extremely desperate, this was another must-win game for them. This is not a good look for the Texans more than it is a good look for the Jets. Jets had a really good second half, but I'm still not convinced. I need to see it again. But let me know what you thought of this game. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we start our game picks right around the corner. We're going to start off with our NFL game picks. 15 games this week, just 2 teams on the bye. We just talked about one of them. 14 more games to predict. We'll get into all of them coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that sound. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my sound. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, November 1st. If you were just tuning in, we just went over the Thursday night football game that saw the Jets win 21-13, snapping a 5-game losing streak, as much of a must-win game as there really has been all season for any team. See if that will put them back on track. In this segment, we turn our attention to the rest of the NFL. We have our Week 9 game picks coming up in just 1 second, but before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, November 1st. But like I was saying, in this segment, we get into our NFL game picks. Week 9 is upon us. The halfway point of the NFL is here, and it has been a crazy half of football. Lots of surprises, no bigger than maybe the Washington Commanders at 6-2 early on in this young season. They're favored by 4 points, traveling to New York to take on the Giants in the Meadowlands. This is a game that I think could get a little bit of a trap game kind of situation. Daniel Jones has been very good versus the Commanders in his career. He hasn't been swept by the Commanders yet in his career. I don't know if that trend really... I don't know how great that trend is when we're looking at this season. The Commanders are playing on a whole nother level. Jaden Daniels still dealing with a little bit of that rib issue. They're favored by 4 in this one on the road. As they head up to New York with the turn of the tide in November, they are still at the top of the NFC East. And this is a much different Commanders, Redskins, Washington football team organization than it has been in almost since the turn of the century, it seems. This team has the momentum, it has the support, it has the talent, and I think they're going to be able to sweep the Giants in this one. I think they win pretty easily on the road, 30-20. A lot of that does depend on Brian Robinson's health, though. He's questionable. I think him going over 100 yards against the Giants in Week 2 when they played in Washington was a huge part of it. That's going to be something to look out for, though. Up next, another division game as the Miami Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa travel to Buffalo to take on the Bills. The Bills favored by 6 in this one, and the Bills have dominated Miami just about every single time they've played over the last 5 years. It looked no different in Week 2 when they played each other. Tua was healthy for the beginning of that game, got hurt trying to make a desperate comeback in the second half. It didn't look like it was going to happen, though, and I really don't feel like this is a Dolphins team that is going to be able to take down this Bills team with the way they're playing. The Bills have only really gotten better since Week 2, while the Dolphins at best have been stagnant. They've looked awful without Tua, and just the second week back with Tua, I'm a little bit concerned about how that offense is going to mesh against a Bills defense that seemingly has had their number. I think Buffalo wins pretty easily again in this one, 33-24. Up next, our first non-divisional game of the week as the Denver Broncos, a resurgent Denver Broncos team, travel to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. The Ravens coming off of a brutal loss against the Cleveland Browns and Jameis Winston. Denver has been going on a little bit of a win streak here. Winners of 2 straight, 3 of 4, and 5 of their last 6. This is a team whose only loss since Week 2 came in a divisional matchup at home against the Chargers. This is a team that is on a roll, maybe one of the hotter teams in all of football right now. They are traveling to Baltimore, a cross-country flight, never easy on any team, especially a young one. Bo Nix has been playing really good football, just won October Rookie of the Month over some guys like Jaden Daniels, like Caleb Williams, who have played some really, really good football in that stretch. questionable whether or not he deserved it, but he's been the most consistent guy over that stretch, so I'm not super mad about it. This game should be a lot of fun. The question is, can Baltimore's defense step up? They have had the worst pass defense in the league, going up against a Broncos team that has just not made a lot of mistakes. This is a Ravens team that, with Lamar Jackson now missing 2 practices already this week, reports are that he practiced today, but still a little bit of a concern for the Baltimore Ravens. You don't want your star MVP quarterback in Lamar Jackson missing much time. That doesn't really have a good look or a good history for the Ravens. He is amazing, and I think they're going to find a way to win this game after a letdown in Cleveland. But this is not just going to be some pushover game. It's a very good defense they'll be facing in Denver, and they need to be ready, because if they come out a little underprepared, like I feel like they did in Cleveland, they'll find a way to lose that one as well. I'm still riding with the Ravens. The Ravens win this one 35-23. Then an interesting one. We just finished talking about Cleveland. They host the Los Angeles Chargers this week, coming off of a huge win. Jameis Winston's first start of the season was successful in a way that you don't really expect. The Ravens dropped a couple interceptions and they were able to win, but the biggest part of that is that they were able to overcome some of those mistakes, those near fatal errors that Jameis Winston is just prone to making sometimes. Jameis Winston is going to put you in positions to win. He's also going to put you in positions to lose. This is a very opportunistic defense in the Los Angeles Chargers. It's not a defense that I think truly deserves that ranking as the number 1 scoring defense right now. They've yet to really play anybody, but the Browns aren't really that super tough challenge. The Browns don't have a real receiving threat after trading away Amari Cooper. Nick Chubb is still getting his legs under him. I think he's going to need to have a big game for the Browns in this one, but they're going to be able to rely on the run game a little bit. This is a Chargers team that, in a perfect world, will play 3 yards in a cloud of dust football. Justin Herbert is one of the more talented quarterbacks in the NFL, and yet he hasn't had to do all of what he's had to do in the past. There are some games where they've thrown him out there and said, "Hey, go do your Justin Herbert magic," and it hasn't always worked out. But this is a game that I think is really a toss-up. In this one, the Chargers are favored by 1.5 on the road. I think Cleveland protects the dog pound in this one at home, and they find a way to come out with a tight victory, 24-20. Then an ugly one, another divisional game, as the New Orleans Saints travel to Carolina to take on Bryce Young and the Panthers. We saw this matchup already early on in the season, week 1 or 2, when they faced off against each other during the Saints' really hot streak, week 1 of this season. Same quarterback in. Derek Carr will be back for this one. They don't have quite the same weapons the Saints do. Defensively, they're missing a couple of pieces, so I don't think it's going to be that blowout that we saw it was in week 1. But I still think this Saints team is leagues better than the Carolina Panthers. Regardless of not having Rashid Shaheed, this is still a team that, is just frankly better than the Carolina Panthers are. The Panthers, I think, will give a little bit more of a fight, but I still don't think it's going to matter. New Orleans favored by 7 on the road, and I think they double them up, 26-13. Las Vegas travels to Cincinnati, and the Bengals favorite 7 season. Not of a team like the Cleveland, like the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals have a very, very strong offense, of course, and the defense is starting to play a little bit better, but it still isn't all the way there. We saw them get absolutely thwacked by the Eagles last week. This is a game where, once again, they're not going to have T. Higgins, but against a defense like the Raiders, I don't think that will matter. What really is going to matter is that Max Crosby matchup. This is going to be a lot closer of a game than I think a lot of people think, and once again, the Bengals still have yet to win a game at home this season, and I think that's a big thing to consider. This is a must-win game at home for them. It kind of feels like that, as they've had a very, very slow start to the year. I think the Bengals find a way to win this one way closer than a lot of people think, 31-27. After the Bengals game, we travel to Atlanta. They host the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys coming off, in my opinion, their best game of the season, especially in that fourth quarter. If they can ride that momentum, if they can continue that train that they have gotten going a little bit off of that bye week against a good San Francisco 49ers team, if that defense can play like they did late in that game, getting key stops. Now, there's still a lot of work to do. It doesn't sound like they're getting Micah Parsons back, which is a big blow. And the Atlanta Falcons have been playing really good football down the stretch here. The Falcons favored by 3.5 in this one. I still think this one is going to be a lot closer for comfort, a lot too close for comfort for a lot of Atlanta fans, but this one should be one that they find a way to win. I'm going with Atlanta to win this one 31-28. Maybe the ugliest game of the season. We already had one ugly game in New England when the New England Patriots took on the Miami Dolphins without Tua Tagovailoa. Now we get the New England Patriots traveling to Tennessee, taking on a team in the Titans that have arguably been worse than the Miami Dolphins. Now they were able to take down those Miami Dolphins earlier in the season, but this is one where as we take a look at these two matchups, we're not sure what the status of both starting quarterbacks are. Mason Rudolph seems to be the guy over there as Will Levis continues to improve from his injury. We don't know whether Jacoby Brissett or Drake May will start. Again, that depends on Drake May's passing the concussion protocol there. Not sure how far along he is on that one. That's going to be a big factor. I think if Drake May plays, they win this game. But that Tennessee defense is very solid. It's a very good defense, and it's something to keep in mind as we go into the analysis of this game. Tennessee favored by 3.5 at home. I'm going to take them in this one in a low-scoring affair. Tennessee wins 14-10. Maybe potentially game of the week up next as the Chicago Bears travel to Arizona to take on Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. The Chicago Bears need a get-right game like nobody's business right now, losing in heartbreaking fashion to the Washington Commanders, of course, on the Hail Mary. Lots of things to break down on that one. We talked a lot about it over this week, over the course of everything going on. You still have to consider all of that when you talk about this Bears team. A Bears team that has had its success against some weaker teams. This is a Cardinals team that's coming off of two very close victories against the Dolphins and the Chargers. They've won 2 straight games on walk-off field goals. Chad Ryland has had a really good season in replacement of Matt Prater, who went down with an injury earlier on in the year. This is a Cardinals team that is playing with a lot of heart, a lot of energy right now, and it's going to be a tough one in Chicago. This is a game that I think really means a lot for this Bears team, especially after that heartbreaking loss in Washington. I feel like they're going to come out with a fury, and that's it. That is a defense in Arizona's that I think they can take advantage of. I still think this is going to be a very close game, and Arizona -2 does show that this is a game that people expect to be close, but I'm going to lead on the side of Caleb Williams in this one, the slightly more consistent offense in the Bears, and I'm going to pick them and their defense to take care of Arizona 27-24. The Jacksonville Jaguars travel all the way up the East Coast to Philadelphia to take on the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles just had maybe their best game of the season. Ever since the bye week, Jalen Hurts has not turned the ball over, and that has been the key when we're looking at how successful these teams are going to be. They're favored by 7.5 in this one. That is a lot of points against the Jaguars team that over the last couple weeks has started to find their footing. Now, they did just lose to Malik Willis in Green Bay. They still made it a game at the end. They can't come off a one-on-one campaign in London, then they play a close game. They win a game against the Colts back in Jacksonville. This is a team that is starting to maybe find its stride. Trevor Lawrence is playing his best football of the season down the stretch here. I still don't know if it's going to be enough for a win against the Eagles, as they should gash them on the ground and through the air with their just immensely more talented roster, but I do think the Jaguars put up a little bit of a fight here. They lose 27-20. Another candidate for Game of the Week up next as the Green Bay Packers host the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff took an off day. He's in MVP considerations. Jordan Love, questionable. Not sure if he's going to play or how effective he's going to be when he does play. Malik Willis has been very good in spot starts without Jordan Love, and the Packers just continue to win games. I think the Packers have a better defense than the Lions do, but I think the Lions, coming off of a big win where their special teams really played a big role, Jared Goff had kind of a down day. I think this is a Lions offense that is better than that Packers offense, maybe one of the most explosive offenses in the league right now. I think they're going to be able to get out of this one in a very, very close win. They're favored by 3 on the road here. It's a divisional game, so we don't know what's going to happen. The last time they played a divisional game, they were able to escape with a win over the Vikings on a last-second field goal. I think this is going to be a very similar kind of game, maybe not last-second field goal, but coming down to the wire, I think they win 34-30. Then the Rams, a resurgent, healthy Rams, take on the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. They travel over there after getting a huge win over the Minnesota Vikings on Thursday Night Football. They're getting healthier. That is the key for them. Matthew Stafford throws 4 touchdowns, only 1 interception, a really bad interception, but just 1 interception nonetheless. They're able to escape with a 10-point lead over the Minnesota Vikings last Thursday. They get a little bit of a pseudo bye week, getting a couple extra days to prepare, get healthy. I think the Rams are going to be able to take care of a very weak Seattle defense, win 33-24 in a game where they're only favored by 1. Then the Sunday night game. This one got flexed in earlier on this season as the new starter for the Indianapolis Colts, Joe Flacco, takes on the Minnesota Vikings as the Vikings favored by 5 in this one. Joe Flacco has been playing very good football, and this is a Colts team that I think as long as they play clean football, something they haven't really been able to do, hit the checkdowns, make the right plays, they should be able to stay in any game. The question is, how is Cam Robinson going to do in this offense? Is he going to be able to be a good stand-in for Christian Darrisaw just like that? I'm not entirely convinced. I think it might take another week, and this is a Vikings team that I think is really good, but 5 points is way too much, and I think Indy might be able to pull off an upset here, winning 27-26. And that takes us to the Monday game. I'll do a little bit of brief analysis for you here, but we'll do more in-depth analysis when it comes to Monday as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. The Chiefs favored by 8.5 in this one. Again, the Chiefs are really good. They find a way to win. That defense is elite, especially at stopping the run. Baker Mayfield doesn't have a lot of weapons. They're going to need another big day out of K-Dot, and McMillan needs to step up. They're going to need Trey Palmer to step up. The questionable, we don't know how healthy Sterling Shepard is going to be, but if he's out there, he's going to need to step up. They're going to need a lot from their guys. This is going to be a tough one. I'm taking Kansas City to win, though, 30-24. But let me know what you think of these games. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. We're going to take a quick break, though. When we come back, we turn our attention to the world of college football. Week 10, a massive matchup between Ohio State and Penn State, and a couple of other huge games this week. We break all of those down and much more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, November 1st. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the Week 9 NFL game picks. A great week. It looks like a good slate this week in the NFL, especially in the 4 o'clock matchups. In this segment, we turn our attention to college football. Another chaotic Saturday is on the horizon. I can smell it in the air. We got 14 of the hottest matchups coming up for you that we will break down coming up in just 1 second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen, for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, November 1st. But like I was saying, in this segment, we turn our attention over to college football. Another chaotic week is right around the corner. I can sense it. It is going to be a fun week in the sport, and no better place to start than with the marquee matchup of the week. The number 4 team in the nation, the Ohio State Buckeyes, travel to Happy Valley as 3-point favorites to take on the number 3 team in the nation, the Penn State Nittany Lions. This game can go this game could go a couple different ways, right? It all depends on one factor, that Ohio State offensive line. Way number 1, and the way that I think this game is most likely going to go, that offensive line has trouble holding up the same way that it did against Nebraska, the same way it did against a little bit of Oregon. Since those injuries took place, they have not been quite the same team, and I think that Penn State defense is going to be a lot for them to handle. Way 2 is that offensive line holds up, and the key factor here is Drew Aller playing for Penn State. I'm going on the assumption that he is, but if he isn't, this game strikes a whole nother chord. I'm, again, going off of the assumption that he is going to be playing, that this will be a fully healthy offense for Penn State. And because of that, I'm leaning towards them. That offensive line really does concern me about Ohio State. And Ohio State is a team that kind of needs this. They kind of need this win if they want to prove that they will be a team that is not going to be anything you can mess with as the season reaches its climax. They head to Happy Valley, and that is a tough place to play. James Franklin, 1-9 all-time versus Ohio State. Ryan Day, 2-8 versus AP top 5 teams. This is going to be a trend breaker either way, and I think I'm leaning towards Penn State in this one. They win 32-29. Outside of that matchup, there's a couple of other huge matchups that have a lot of big implications. Number 5, Miami hosts Duke, a Duke team that quietly has put together a really good season. They had a really tough loss against SMU last week, a team that we're going to talk about at the end of this segment. This was a very, very good Duke team. They've had a couple of tough losses recently. Miami's still undefeated, but should be a little concerned. Duke is a team that's playing a lot better football right now. They've been playing pretty consistently over the last couple of weeks. And I think they could give Miami some fits. That Miami defense has its issues. Very clearly it has its issues. That Miami defense is one that you should be a little concerned about, but Cam Ward plays like a superhero half the time, and I think he and that offense should be enough to take out Duke. It's 21-point spread on this. I think that's too many points, but I still think Miami wins without breaking too much of a sweat, 37-24. An SEC matchup up next is number 19 Ole Miss, favored by 7.5 points, travels to Arkansas to take on the Razorbacks, right? This is a matchup in Fayetteville that I mean, we talk about it all the time. Whenever you play Arizona, just chaos seems to ensue. Ole Miss is a team that I feel like will not thrive in chaos, and I think it's going to put a little bit of stress on them. I think 7.5 points is a lot, but I think they're going to be able to survive it. If they lose another game, they are out of any kind of contention. They're still in it right now because of how crazy the SEC has been, and nothing is for certain right now. But I think Ole Miss does just enough to escape Arkansas with a win. They get out of there 28-23. Then another really good game, this time in the Big Ten, as Minnesota, one of the hottest teams in college football right now, travels to take on number 24, Illinois. Illinois just got blown out by Oregon, the number one team in the nation. But outside of that, they've played some really good ball against some really good opponents. They've taken out some tough teams earlier on this season. Their offense really has been the biggest surprise for me, and it's been very consistent. Even against an Oregon team where they kind of got out of sorts, the offense looked pretty solid, even though they didn't put too many points up on the board. I think they're going to do just enough to take care of a good Minnesota team, a Minnesota team that's favored in this matchup on the road, and that one I just don't understand. Even if Illinois doesn't win this game, I don't understand why Minnesota's favored. I think Illinois takes this one, especially since it's at home, and that Big Ten home atmosphere does mean a lot. They win 30-26. Then a game I will be at, heading up to Syracuse. Syracuse takes on Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech favored by 4 after struggling in the non-conference a little bit, almost beating Miami in the first game of the ACC. Virginia Tech has been really, really good. They do this seemingly every year. They struggle in the non-conference. Then they compete for the ACC title, going on a run down the stretch. They're not really being taken too seriously because of that really poor non-conference start to the season after they were getting some kind of dark horse CFP buzz. If they can take down Syracuse, a really good team, on the road, that is something that will add to their case, and they're not out of the race in the ACC. If a couple of things fall their way down the stretch of the season, they could still find their way into that championship game. So it's not out of the way for Virginia Tech, but it is a must-win game for them. Syracuse trying to play spoiler a little bit at home. They are coming off of a brutal game against Pitt, one that if they won, I think they would have been put into the top 25 without a question. They get absolutely destroyed. They throw 5 interceptions. Kyle McCord kind of goes back to his last year days. He's been really prolific through the air, and that Syracuse team, especially its wide receivers, running backs, is very physical, and that could add some issues for Virginia Tech, and I think that's what's going to make the difference. Tech's favored by 4 on the road in this one, but I think Syracuse takes the win 37-33. Then Vanderbilt traveling to Auburn, and I wasn't really going to talk about this one. Vanderbilt's been playing really good football. They just lose to Texas, a top 5 ranked team in the nation, but only barely after taking a huge win against Alabama earlier on in the season. This is a Vanderbilt team that at least plays teams close, and against Auburn, that's arguably been the worst team in the SEC. Even if it is in Auburn, they're favored by 8, and that makes absolutely no sense to me. Diego Pavia plays really good football. I think 8 points is way too much, and I think Vanderbilt actually finds a way to win this one on the road, 27-23. Heading to the Sun Belt for a matchup that didn't seem like it was going to be a big deal at the beginning of the season, or at least not the way that it is now. Old Dominion coming off of an absolute dominating victory against Georgia Southern, a Georgia Southern team that had been seemingly on a destiny path to the top of the Sun Belt East. Now Old Dominion looks like they might be that team. They take on App State, who's had a really struggle of a year, from starting off slow to, of course, the tragedy with the hurricane running through their town over there in the hills of North Carolina. They get to play at home for just this for the second week since the tragedy hit App State. I think they come out with a little bit of that extra juice, and I think it puts them over the top of Old Dominion. This should be a fun game, though. I think they win 37-34. Then the number 1 team in the nation is back in action. Number 1 Oregon, favored by 14.5, travel to Michigan, play in the Big House, a place that they've been beatable in. They lost to Texas there. That really helped catapult Texas to the top. I don't think this is a Michigan team, even though they're starting to figure things out a little bit, that's going to provide too much of a challenge for a good Oregon squad. I think Oregon comes in and absolutely dominates. They win 40-21. Then Texas Tech travels to number 11 Iowa State. And this game I think is going to be a lot more of a barn burner than a lot of people think. Texas Tech coming up just short against TCU last week. Texas Tech is a good football team. Iowa State, of course, still undefeated, right? Rated in that top 12 right now. I think arguably, at least in my opinion, they should be a top 10 team. This should be a fun game. Texas Tech has the offense to keep up with them. It's going to be a question of whether or not the Texas Tech defense can stop Iowa State's offense that's only seemingly getting better. Iowa State favored by 13.5 in this one. I still feel like that's a lot of points, although I do think it'll be close. I think they win 38-26. Iowa State does. Then Arizona traveling to UCF. UCF, every time they're favored, this time favored by 6, they seemingly find a way to lose, at least from what I've seen. I think UCF is getting very overrated. I do think Arizona is a team that that isn't getting the right amount of respect. They've fallen way off from where they were last year. That offense not being the same, the defense obviously way worse. But I still think they're going to find a way to win in Central Florida. I think they win in a close one, 27-24. Couple games left to go. Another big one in the Big 12 as Arizona State, favored by 4, travels to Oklahoma State. This is an Oklahoma State team that might be the most disappointing team of the season. They came in ranked in the top 15. They were in there for a while. They took a couple of back-to-back brutal losses, and they just have not looked good all season long. This is an Oklahoma State team that I think still could turn it on at any moment, and Arizona State has put together a couple of pretty impressive performances. I think this game should be fun. It's not going to matter too much in the end, but it's still a fun one to keep an eye on. Arizona State favored by 4. I think it's going to be a little closer than that. I still think Arizona State finds a way to win 31-28. Then we got 3 games left, and I think these 3 might be some of the best games of the week. A couple of them I think are being overlooked a little bit, or at least one of them is. Number 10, Texas A&M. They're now the leaders in the SEC. They control their own destiny, basically, to the SEC championship game and a spot in the college football playoff. They travel to South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks. Beamer ball down there has been an absolute spoiler for a lot of teams. This is a very good South Carolina team, and Texas A&M should not be too comfortable. Texas A&M has been playing its best football since they get Connor Wegman back. I think this is going to be a very tight game. They're favored by 3 on the road. I think they're able to escape with a victory, but this is not one that I feel very confident in. I think South Carolina is a school that is built to upset and spoil a lot of teams' hopes, and I don't think that's something that they're going to plan on stopping now. I think Texas A&M still finds a way to pull it out. They win 33-28. 2 games left that I wanted to go over, and this one I think is flying under the radar a little bit. A Louisville team that's lost 3 games now this season, all of them against really, really good teams, travels to Clemson, the other number 11 team in the nation. This is a team tied same amount of points in the AP poll as Iowa State. One of those should be a top 10 team, I think, but regardless of that, I think both of them should actually. But Clemson, this is their first real challenge of the season since they faced Georgia and got absolutely destroyed early on in the year. This is a Clemson team that seemingly has flipped a switch, played really good, especially on the offensive end. But if you're looking for a firework game, if you're looking for the highest scoring game of the week, this is my best bet for that. Both of these teams really struggle on the defensive end of the ball. I think there's a chance both of these teams could get up to 40 points. We're looking at potentially a 48-45 kind of game. I think this ends a little bit less high scoring than that. I think Clemson's able to pull out a very tight victory in just an offensive battle. Clemson's favored by 10 in this one. I think that's a little ridiculous. This is going to be just a shootout, kind of like the Louisville-Miami game was. I think Clemson wins 37-34. And the final game that I wanted to talk about this week, maybe the closest matchup of the week, as number 18 Pitt still undefeated, travels to number 20 SMU. SMU with just one loss on the year in the non-conference. That was week 1 of the season. They have played really good football since. They get wins over Syracuse. They get wins over Duke. They get wins over Louisville. Some really quality wins down the stretch of over the last couple of games for Southern Methodist as they play their first season in the ACC. They have a real shot to win the ACC title. This is the biggest game of the year for them, though. This is the biggest game of the year for both of these teams, as Pitt, coming off of a massive performance defensively, they've continued to force those turnovers. The offense, I think, is going to need to do a little bit on the road here. I think SMU is a slightly better team. 7.5 is a lot of points, though. I think Pitt keeps this close, but I think at the end of the day, SMU is just a juggernaut right now. I think they win 30-27. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these games. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we end our show with a little bit of basketball talk. Fact or fiction? Is Giannis going to get traded? Make sure you stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, November 1st. If you were just tuning in, we just went over our NFL and college football game picks for this weekend's action. Should be a packed weekend in the sport. Very, very excited to see everything that goes down. In this segment, we turn our attention to basketball. Some rumors have been going around surrounding the second best player in the world in Giannis Antetokounmpo. We'll talk about that, if they are real or fake, in our first installment of a new series here, Fact or Fiction. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, November 1st. But like I was saying, in this segment, we turn our attention back to the NBA. Some major news coming out. Maybe when coming with our coach season working, this is a very similar situation. Is it going to work the same way for these two? Is it just not going to work out? This is a report that came out that GMs are looking at calling at a trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, obviously, of course they are. If you have a chance to go and get the second best player in the world, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you go out and get Giannis if you could? There's a report from CBS that says preferred trade destinations are the Miami Heat. Sure, why not? Go play with Jimmy Butler and the Heat down there and them boys in Miami. A lot better area, I think, than Milwaukee in general. or the Brooklyn Nets. And that one makes no sense. Why the Brooklyn Nets? The Nets have nothing. Literally nothing. The Nets have nothing. They have not. They've got Cam Thomas over there, but they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league. They're openly probably tanking this year. Ben Simmons is their second star. They were seriously considering giving some big minutes to a lot of guys that were basically out of the league after last season. This is not the team that I think is going to go out and get Giannis. But maybe there's some maybe there's some truth to these rumors, and we'll break down the whole timeline. This is not the first time that Giannis has had trade rumors surrounding him, right? Back before they won their first title in 2019, in 2020, there were rumors of Giannis wanting out of Milwaukee, saying, "Hey, I need you guys to prove to me that we want to win. I need you guys to prove to me that we're not just going to be stuck in this cycle of being a really good regular season team and not getting anywhere in the playoffs." This after years of getting eliminated in the first and second round. They go out and they trade for Drew Holiday. That's enough for Giannis to say, okay, I'm going to stay here and sign. They end up winning his first and only championship in his career so far. Now 30 years old, Giannis is on those same track. He's like, hey, I want you to prove that you're winning, right? They've had a lot of injuries really kind of hinder them since 2021. Chris Middleton has yet to play a full season slash playoffs since that last one. Giannis went down in the postseason. They make this trade for Damian Lillard, and it just has been quite a disaster. Lillard and Giannis don't seem to get along very well. They didn't practice that much in the offseason, and the beginning of this season has just been a disaster. 1-4 to start off the year. A lot of people blaming Doc Rivers, and I don't blame them. But if something doesn't change, is there any truth to the rumor that Giannis is on the trade block? First of all, I don't see a world where the Bucks trade Giannis. He's 30 years old. He's still playing like the second best player in the world, only behind Jokic. And I don't think there's a trade package in the world that any team can really give to go and get him. Also, along the lines that the Nets are one of his preferred destinations, that just does not make any sense. I understand the Heat. I understand if the Thunder are interested, they might be able to put together a package with all of their combined picks and stuff. That's the only team in the Thunder that I think could even potentially put together something, and him on the Thunder would be something scary. But as far as how accurate this idea of a trade is, as far as how I really if I think this is really going to happen, the answer is just no. I don't see a world where this happens. I don't see a world where Giannis is traded from the Bucks this offseason. I understand as a GM you have to be ready. I understand as a GM, if Giannis is available, you want to call them. You want to pick up that call and you want to say, "Hey, I will give you the world for Giannis Antetokounmpo," especially if you are a contending team. But I just don't see any truth to this right now, and I would be shocked if this is a fact as opposed to a fiction and he gets traded away. But let me know what you think. But thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I appreciate everybody so much for spending your week with me this week. Hope you enjoy this week of football. We'll be back same time, same place on Monday, talking about all of the action from around the world of sports, whether it be hockey, whether it be basketball, whether it be football, or even a little bit of baseball as the offseason gets underway. We will bring all of the biggest news to you every single weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Appreciate all you guys sticking around. You've been listening to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.